Here I go again, and I've already practiced this with him. Travis is well acquainted with San Miguel as he recently published Atención, and yes, you can ask that question. Now listen to the rest. He now publishes the leading source of English language news about Mexico, the Mexico News Daily. And I did it again. I've already practiced this. Today, he'll provide us with his view of the most relevant Mexican news stories of 2024 and how they could impact our lives. He will also share about the evolving landscape of news dissemination, the significance of cross-cultural understanding, and the role of news media in shaping our perceptions. The mission of Mexico News Daily is to extend beyond reporting. It is known for reliable information, invaluable insights, and a lot of great actual news about politics, economy, business, and security matters. Travis's vision is to enlighten, engage, and expand the horizons of us, his audience, by curating expat-relevant information on art and culture and history and travel and real estate and lifestyle in our adopted home of Mexico. He thereby fosters a deeper understanding of how we can appreciate the diverse aspects of Mexico. Please help me welcome Travis to the Midday Rotary Club of San Miguel de Allende.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Is everyone awake? Thank you. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. It's really an honor to be here, seeing what you guys do. The 4 commandments, or whatever you call them, really resonated with me. I think that's really cool, and you'll see how I think we try to incorporate a lot of those commandments into what we do as well. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about sort of who Mexico News Daily is, or what it is, and what inspired my wife and I to purchase it. And then I'm going to get into what I think are some of the top news stories that are relevant for us as citizens living in Mexico this year. So, and then I'll have a ton of time for questions at the end, okay? So, really, my wife and I have been living in San Miguel for 4 years now. We came during the pandemic. We ended our corporate careers. We said now was the time during the start of the pandemic. We didn't exactly know what the new chapter would be, but we said, let's figure it out when we get to San Miguel. One of the things myself I've always been sort of frustrated with in my connection with Mexico is I've always felt like I've been on the defensive. So actually about 30 years ago, I came to Mexico to study, to Guadalajara, and everybody I knew basically said, why Mexico? Why would you go to Mexico? Back then it was a little bit rougher in some cases, not as common to see people living there or moving there, studying there. My university had a program in Barcelona, and so logically everyone was saying, if you want to learn Spanish, why don't you just go there? Why would you go to Mexico? But it was the time that NAFTA was being signed. I saw a lot of potential for business between US, Mexico, Canada, and I said, maybe I should learn Spanish in Mexico. But since then, whether it was vacationing in Mexico afterwards, doing business in Mexico, getting married in Mexico, now living in Mexico, I've always been on the defensive. People have always said, why are you doing this? Do you feel safe? Do you feel comfortable? And a lot of that is because of the way the media portrays Mexico, right? If you go on any international news source, whether it's the BBC or CNN or whatever, 9 out of 10 articles about Mexico tend to be negative, right? They tend to focus on the same types of stories over and over. Narcos, violence, drug trafficking, fentanyl, border issues, corruption. That is part of the Mexico story, as we all know, right? There's no denying that. But there's so much more to that story. And so when my wife and I came here, we said, what can we do to have an impact on this country that's been so good to us? We don't have children. We still had a lot of energy, have a lot of energy, I guess I could say. And we said, what can we do that could have an impact on a large scale? And so we started looking for outlets of media. Neither one of us have any media or any background in this space, but we thought what if we could purchase a platform, and we purchased ultimately what at the time was the largest platform of news, and have since more than doubled it in the last year, where we could elevate Mexico's profile, right? At the end of the day, Mexico suffers from a bad profile in many cases around the world. So we said, what if we could help in our own way, through more complete, balanced news reporting, help elevate the profile of Mexico as a premier destination, not only for tourists to go to an all-inclusive in Cancun, but for people to come live, entrepreneurs to come start businesses, people to live, families to come, digital nomads to come, etc. So that's what we've been focused on, and we also feel like it's a special time for Mexico. So I've been intimately involved in Mexico for 30 years now, and I really do feel like the stars are aligning for this country right now. And I'll talk about that, and I'll talk about why. And through the news, you can kind of see that happening, right? Whether it's business with nearshoring, record tourism numbers, record foreign direct investment, record amounts of Americans and Canadians moving here. There's many, many indicators that suggest that it's a great time for Mexico right now. Okay, why does it matter to us? At the end of the day, as all of you know intimately because of the work you do in the Rotary, Mexico still is a very poor country. You can just leave San Miguel a few miles out, and it's a whole different world. And I think, it's easy when you're in, downtown San Miguel de Allende, or you go to the nice neighborhoods in Mexico City that are booming right now, or other, beach communities, and you forget that this country still has serious problems and a long ways to go, whether it's education, accessibility to clean water, accessibility to health care. And really, we feel like the best way to solve those problems, because you can't always count on the government to solve those problems, and I'm not weighing in on a right or left commentary there, but really private investment is critical, right? A lot of the water issues, I used to work in the water business for 20 years. A lot of the water issues aren't solved at the government level. They're solved by private industry installing recycling programs in their facilities, right? It's simple things that private industry does. So I'm a strong believer, as is my wife, on the power of private investment, foreign investment, and we believe that through Mexico News Daily, as we improve the perception of the country, it creates this positive flywheel of more people coming, more people investing, and ultimately improve living standards for the country. It's already happening in many places. All you have to do is drive 45 minutes away to Querétaro to see a city that truly is becoming a first world city in many ways. There's good and bad to that, but at the end of the day, the living standards, the quality of life in Querétaro is a great example of that. Monterrey is another great example of that. Guadalajara is another example of that. So there truly is this emerging, strong, growing middle class in Mexico, and I think that's a really positive thing to see spreading across the country. Okay, so how we do it is through our website. So it's an entirely digital platform. I learned some hard lessons on the cost of a physical printing operation through Atención. We have a website, mexiconewsdaily.com, and basically, as you can see, we have all these different sections of news and information on Mexico. Okay, I'll get into that a little bit more in the next few slides. We now have over 40 people on our team. We're in 13 different states in Mexico. We're in 7 different countries around the world. The sun literally doesn't set on Mexico News Daily. It really does help to have people throughout the world because literally every single day we're producing news, just like any other news site. And that may seem like not a big deal, but when you're actually in it, it's a major deal to every day have to create, write, edit, find pictures, publish news on a daily basis. So you can see a few of the numbers. One of the ones I'm most proud of is our team's age ranges from 22 years old to 82 years old. So we have huge diversity in many ways, as you can see on here. Okay, our reach, we actually now have, on average, over 1 million unique readers per month visiting our site. That's more than double from when we bought it 18 months ago. People come to our site. We are the anti-social media, right? We are not the civil list, right? We are not where you find the new taqueria or you want to complain about something in San Miguel. We are a place where you go and you read and you learn and you get more informed about this country. That's reflected in, an average of more than 4 minutes, which is a ton of time if you think of the time you often spend looking at something on social media. Okay, just one last slide on Mexico News Daily. 80%, 80, of our current readers are not in Mexico. Okay, so using round numbers, 20% of our readers are in Mexico, 60% are in the United States, 10% are in Canada, 10% are in the rest of the world. Okay, it's pretty fascinating because through an all-digital platform, you can see, you could tell me, your hometown in the United States, and I could tell you how many readers have read Mexico News Daily from that town. So this week, for example, we're doing a special series on the relationship between India and Mexico, which is this fascinating relationship. My wife is Indian, so we were a little extra inspired to do that. But, leading up to this, we looked, and 48,000 people from India read Mexico News Daily last year. So we really do have a global reach in what we're doing. Last week, I gave a presentation to the British Society of Mexico. We had over 50,000 people from the UK read Mexico News Daily last year. So here you see our numbers. You can see in order the top cities where our readers are, all in North America except London. And actually, San Miguel de Allende is number 21. I had to cut it off somewhere, but San Miguel de Allende was our 21st city in terms of readership. Okay, one thing we've done very different than the previous owner. The previous owner, Mexico News Daily has been around for 9 years. The previous owner was a Canadian living on the beach in Oaxaca, and he really created Mexico News Daily as a source of information for his friends, right? So his focus was a little different. For many of the reasons we're living in San Miguel, it's very different than living on a beach. So he didn't really focus on art, culture, cuisine, politics, a lot of that. It was more just kind of the quirky, funny, things going on in Mexico. So we have tried to really broaden our coverage much more to focus on the changing expat community and the changing community interested in Mexico, right? We all see it here. More families, more kids, more young people, right? More people not just from the US and Canada, but all over the world, right? So we've been trying to reflect that through our content. And you'll see that if you go to our site. So I'm just going to stop there. That's the Mexico News Daily sort of background. We can do questions in a few minutes. I thought I'd just take a few minutes to talk about some of the key news stories of the year. If any of you remember Forbes magazine, Forbes would always have at the beginning, with all thy getting, get understanding. And that quote always resonated with me because I think, and I've been somewhat dismayed in many cases, when you see expats coming to Mexico and really not caring, just not caring to learn, not caring about what makes the country tick, what's going on in politics, what's going on in business. And I think that's unfortunate, and it's a missed opportunity. And so, again, that's a big part of why we exist, to try to, encourage people, inspire people, and make the news approachable. Most people I know don't want to even think about politics in the US. So why would you want to read about politics in Mexico? Well, we'll tell you why. Because actually, it's pretty damn inspiring what's going on in politics in Mexico right now. Okay? So, with that, I thought a good place to start, if you wanted a little 101 on our content, I wrote at the end of last year, just the year in review, some of the key articles that I thought kind of summarize the year in news in Mexico. Okay, here's the link to it. You don't have to write it down. The point is, if you go to our site, there's a search bar. You can search for me, and you'll see every article I write every week, and I try to provide my perspective on what's going on. I don't know how that happened. Okay. So, again, if you just go to the site and type in my name in the search bar, you'll see everything I wrote. This is just one example, but it is an example where I review the key news stories of last year, okay, to kind of get you up to speed. More importantly, I think, is what's going to happen this year. right? So these are not pretty slides. I kind of just cut and pasted the headline and the stories. But at the beginning of this year, I wrote what my top 17, I couldn't come up with a round number, so I had 17 that I wanted to communicate, so it was 17 of my top predictions for Mexico news for this year. And I'm just going to go through them very briefly with you right now, okay? So I'll just spend about 10 seconds on each one. The nearshoring boom will continue to accelerate, and Mexico will receive a record amount of foreign direct investment. Okay, last year, Mexico had a record amount of foreign direct investment. Last year, for the first time in 20 years, the United States bought more stuff from Mexico than from China. Okay, I'm not China bashing in any way, but it is pretty cool and it makes sense, right? It makes sense that we're buying from our neighbors and not necessarily from far away. It makes sense for many, many reasons. What's so cool about this nearshoring boom is, for those of you that remember the promise of NAFTA, and again, the reason I came here was because of the promise of NAFTA and the opportunity. When I came, ultimately what happened was so much of that promise ended up going to China. Okay, I myself ended up going to China more than 50 times over my career because I was moving a ton of manufacturing and work over to China, as anyone in manufacturing was doing. And so Mexico didn't realize that potential that they could have 25, 30 years ago. It's happening again now. And it's really exciting because this time it feels real for so many reasons that I won't get into, but we all know. Okay? Number two, and somewhat related to this, one, if not two, Chinese auto companies will announce massive plant investments in Mexico. That is in the news every day. This crazy, you know, the UAW's new contract and Chinese auto companies looking to move out of China. It's a fascinating topic. It's easy to say, well, why would we want Chinese cars to come here? But they're all, you know, electric cars. So if we want electric cars, they're moving faster. It's a complicated topic. And Mexico is really ultra well positioned to receive a lot of Chinese auto investment. Why would they come here? Because they can get into the United States and Canada without paying any duties, which could cause all kinds of political problems, right? So it's something really fascinating to follow. If a Chinese car came to the US directly right now, it would be 26% duty. Right now, if it came through Mexico, it would be zero, right? 60% of the new cars purchased in Mexico last year were Chinese cars in Mexico. So this is happening at light speed. We covered an article. So my prediction on January 6th was one or two companies. Yesterday, the third one, we covered it in our paper. The third one already announced that they are, it depends how you count it, but the big ones, there's three that already this year, I'm glad you're following that, Raphael. So big issue, huge issue. One of them is between the biggest one, BYD, if you've heard of that company. You see them. I was in Mexico City last week. We took an Uber. It was a BYD Uber, the biggest Chinese electric car company. They are deciding between Guanajuato and Nuevo León in northern Mexico, and I think they're going to pick Guanajuato. We were in a hotel in Reforma in Mexico City. We came down at night for dinner. There were 3 large vans there with BYD executives. So our hotel was full of Chinese executives from BYD, I'm sure here scouting for sites to put a plant. As a result of number 2, number 3, more and more tension is going to happen between US, Mexico, and Canada. NAFTA isn't called NAFTA anymore. It's now called the USMCA. Because of that Chinese investment, it's going to cause a lot of issues. I'm sure it's going to be a major campaign issue, both in Mexico and in the United States this year in the elections. Number 4, the NBA will confirm that an expansion team will come to Mexico City. Again, that's me going out on a limb. The NBA has been playing games here for years. It's hugely popular in Mexico. And the thought is the next expansion team of the National Basketball Association will be in Mexico. Another example of cross-cultural ties. We had an article about a month ago that one of the college leagues, the Big 12, not the Big 10, I think the Big 12, is going to start playing games in Mexico. So one of the college leagues in the United States sees the opportunity in Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum, I believe, will win the presidential election in a landslide. Okay, I'm not saying I think that's good or bad. I'm just saying I think that's what's going to happen. Okay, I had the opportunity to meet her a few months ago, and she was here in San Miguel a few days ago. I'm not sure if any of you went there. She was very late, very, very late. She was in the Jardín speaking. And, you know, there's a lot of, first of all, it's exciting. This election, at the end of the day, is between two women. And there's a third candidate, but he's not going to win. So it's between two women. Both of them are relatively young. Both of them are very educated. Both of them have a global profile. Both of them are good, I think, at the end of the day. So it's definitely worth following. We've been writing a lot about it. You'll hear, if you talk to Mexicans, I love this person, I hate this person, somewhat similar to the United States, kind of extreme. But I don't think it's that kind of choice here at all. I myself have voted both sides of the aisle in the United States. I truly could vote for either one of these women, and I think they're going to be fine presidents. I think they're going to be good presidents, great presidents. There's a lot of rhetoric of, Claudia is going to be the puppet of the current president, and that's bad for X, Y, Z. If you really read, I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't think that's going to happen. You may not agree with me, but it's worth reading, it's worth following, okay? The Mexican peso, we all feel its strength, right? We invoice in dollars for subscriptions, and most of our costs are in pesos, so our costs are going up every single day just as a function of the currency. It's at 16.82 today, so I follow it closely. Historically in Mexico, an election has brought tons of exchange rate uncertainty and volatility, and ultimately a devaluation. Really a sign of Mexico's fragility, economic weakness. That's not going to happen this year. We're not seeing it, right? I mean, the peso is rock solid. If anything, it's strengthening. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on as well. Okay, moving right along. And I know I'm going fast, but behind every one of these, there's many articles on our site that we cover every day. The Mayan Train Project. Who's aware of the Mayan Train Project? Okay, all of you. Great. Another controversial, extremely controversial project. We cover it weekly. I believe that as time goes on, it will be viewed as a positive thing for the country. I really do. I've spent a huge amount of time in that part of Mexico for 25 years. And, the reality is there's a lot of poverty there. And so they're not going to attract factories necessarily. And so this is one way that potentially can bring a lot of investment, can bring increased tourism. Again, I'm not weighing in myself whether I think it's good or bad. I just believe that as we start moving on a little bit more in the news cycle, as it evolves, I think people will view it as something really quite historic. And just to put it in perspective, if anyone has followed the train project in California, it's been like 15 years and they still have like 10 miles of tracks or something like that. Here, it was 1,000 miles of train built at the same time and almost completed. So I'm not weighing in on the environmental side of it, but as far as an impressive feat of engineering, it's amazing. Really, outside of China, there's been nothing like this done in the world in a long time. The Tulum Airport, I was just there a few weeks ago, another controversial project. It's in the middle of the jungle. I wrote an article just on me sort of going and checking it out. I think that as well, if you followed that, starting in March, now with spring break, basically every major city in North America is having direct flights there. So as controversial as it was, as much as people said not necessary, blah, 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 at the end of the day, it's going to bring in a huge amount of additional tourism and investment to that region. The Isthmus of Tehuantepec train, it's a hard word to say, but we cover it all the time. Another hugely strategic project. Basically, it's Mexico's alternative to the Panama Canal, if you followed that at all. The Panama Canal right now, because of drought, is having huge issues. They have restricted dramatically the amount of ships that can pass through. What is normally a $500,000 fee to pass through the Panama Canal is now anywhere between $2 and $4 million. So it's a big issue. Mexico has long dreamed of creating this alternative, and it was just recently finished, just last month. What it is ships come from the Pacific and pull right into the port and immediately unload the containers onto a train, 6 hours across Mexico, and then they immediately load the containers onto another ship in the Gulf. Okay? It's not going to be an alternative in terms of the amount of volume that the Panama Canal handles, but it is a very interesting alternative coming at a very interesting time, something worth following. I was at this event in Mexico City last week with the ambassador of the United States, and the United States in particular is very interested in this project and is personally championing this project and pushing and leaning on a lot of American companies to invest in warehouses and infrastructure along that rail corridor as a way to create jobs in southern Mexico that could be attractive to Central Americans. So think about that, right? Most of the immigrants coming into the United States right now are from Venezuela and Central America. They're not from Mexico. And so part of this master strategy, I'm not sure if it's going to work or not, is create more jobs closer to where these people live, provide them an alternative. Okay, Mexico is going to be increasingly an important topic during the elections. We've seen that already. If anyone watched the State of the Union address and then the rebuttal, no comments on the rebuttal. But she referenced, things that happened 20 years ago as if they were relevant today. The point being, people are going to be talking about the border more than anything during this election. That being said, as much of the hatred that'll be going towards Mexico, I think Mexico is going to, increase its share of exports to the U.S. And we reported on it yesterday. January's number, Mexico kept its lead and even extended it a little bit. Last slide. Tesla, as you've probably seen, and I think everyone I talk to, they hate Elon Musk, and I don't understand that because I think it's important to separate Elon Musk, the person, and Elon Musk, the businessman, right? And the reality is, if you believe that electric cars make sense for the future, not many American companies are really moving very fast in that direction. Tesla is, right? And Tesla has announced the largest electric vehicle plant in the world to be built in Monterrey, in northern Mexico. Okay, huge investment. And it not only will be the largest, but it will be the next generation Tesla, which will be the lower cost model, which will in theory be able to compete with the Chinese electric vehicles. So super important issue. We cover it a lot. I think they're going to accelerate that because they're going to see they're going to have to be able to compete with the Chinese. Okay, number 13, US Canadian citizens moving to Mexico is going to continue to accelerate. I travel a lot throughout the country. Everywhere I go, Merida, Vallarta, Cabo, Tulum, anywhere you go, foreigners are coming here to live. They're recognizing the secret's out, right? A lot of people jokingly say to me, are you sure you want more people to realize how great Mexico is? Are you sure you want that? Do we really want a Costco in downtown San Miguel de Allende? Sorry, bad joke, sorry. Okay, I think that the number of tourists are going to continue growing. We had an article on that yesterday, a new record. The Bank of Mexico will finally begin to lower interest rates. Not to get into the wonky economic side of things, but we think interest rates are high in the U.S. The base interest rate in Mexico right now is 11.25%. So why is the peso so strong? Oversimplifying it to the extreme, because it's very attractive to keep money in Mexico at an 11.25% interest rate compared to the U.S. So until the Bank of Mexico starts lowering that rate, the peso likely isn't going to move. I think finally they're going to do that because inflation is finally coming in. So hopefully that will start happening. I predict it should settle in at 18 by the end of the year. Don't bank on that. You know, you can't predict FX rates, right? It's basically impossible. But there is some logic behind FX rates. And the current FX rate, the exchange rate, is dangerous. It is getting expensive, as we all see. You know, I talk to a lot of business people, and a lot of people that have industries here, you know, sell in dollars to the US, and their peso costs keep going up. So it's a delicate issue. And the last thing is Mexico moved up 2 spaces in 2023 to be the 12th largest economy in the world. And the 10th largest is within view, and Mexico could potentially get there by the end of this year. Okay, so I think that's kind of an interesting thing going on as well. Okay, so just a little summary, I guess, of some of the main news stories. You know, again, I think hopefully I've inspired you a little bit to realize why it's important to understand all of this. And I guess I'll end with just a tiny little commercial of, you know, at the end of the day, you know, since my wife and I bought this 18 months ago, we've lost money nonstop, every day, every month, despite doubling the number of readers we have. And the reason is that a lot of people come and, you know, they won't click on the article, or they'll read it, or, you know, or they'll try to log into another browser and read an article free, and they do all these things, and I guess that's fine. But at the end of the day, you know, if you're somewhat saddened by the state of media, it's because, you know, companies like Facebook and Google have made it very difficult for, you know, independent news sources to exist. And so I wrote an article over the weekend on, you know, literally the title was, "Are we crazy to keep investing in Mexico News Daily?" When, you know, the largest news agencies around the world are cutting. And my answer was no, I don't think so. But we do need support, you know, and the support is literally just in the form of it's $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year to just have unlimited access to our news and to support what we're doing. So I'm not here to, like, you know, pass around a hat for money, but I just think it's important people understand, you know, if you're dismayed at the fact that it seems like there's no good news anymore, you know, there's a reason for that. You know, ultimately, it'd be very easy for us to put cartel news because people click on it, right? I mean, people will be like, oh, how many people died in Celaya last night, right? We could do that every day. But that's not real news. That's not productive news. That's not, and we do cover some of that, but there's so much more, as I said. Okay, we could cover the page with ads, right? These crawling ads that block and you have to find the little X. But that's a bad reader experience, so we've cut that out as well. So please support us, and are there any questions any of you have about the news or anything?
That was a very interesting talk. We have very little time for questions, but let's have one.
Sorry, I'll answer them quickly. Go ahead. Travis, good presentation. Good luck.
Thank you.
The newspaper. I think what you're doing is wonderful. A very quick question. You made it sound in your predictions as if we understand about Claudia Sheinbaum and the Mexican election, who probably will win. But you made it sound like it didn't matter who won the U.S. election. I'm one that believes that the U.S., without getting into the politics, the U.S. election will make a big difference in the way in which the United States and Mexico relate economically. What are your thoughts, very quickly?
So I would say I agree with everything you said except the word economically. I think the president that wins in the United States will determine the social, you know, the everything but economical relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. The economic relationship, I think, is so important and so strategic that it's going to thrive no matter who wins. Ironically, and I'm not making any, you know, preferences or anything politically, but for as much noise as former President Trump made about Mexico, he ultimately benefited Mexico dramatically through, or his team, through the new NAFTA. Why? Because it took the value-added component that needed to be made in North America up to 85%. So ironically, many people who understand, the real impact of the trade agreements say Trump did more of a favor to Mexico from a business perspective, from an economic perspective, than anybody else. So I think, again, the Chinese relationship is so complex and so dicey right now that I think the US and Mexico, as it should be, we are tied together at the hip, at the heart, at the head, more than ever, no matter who wins. And I don't think that's just sort of blind optimism, it's realism. There's a book, again, I just wrote about it, Peter Zehan, if you've ever heard of him. He just wrote a book called The Beginning of the End of Globalization. And he says, he's a US guy, very well respected, and he believes that Mexico will be the country that will most benefit in the decades ahead from this global world order. And I write about it. So, go ahead.
Hi there. I'm wondering, do the cartels contact you, or do they influence your reporting at all?
Well, that's a very good question. We get, I don't like to be sort of in the limelight. I never, dreamed of owning a media company, and much less in Mexico. But, to answer your question, we get all kinds of people who write us on a daily basis complaining we're too left, complaining we're too right, complaining we cover too much violence, complaining we don't cover the real Mexico, the violence. And many of them have been around that. Why aren't you covering all the cartel violence? Why aren't you spending more time covering that? And for me, it's two quick reasons. One, I want to stay alive, really, and I mean that. And I want my team to stay alive, and so that's not, it's kind of funny, but it's really not funny because Mexico, more journalists die here than almost any country in the world. So we take that very seriously. But number two is, think about it. If you moved as an expat to the United States, would you subscribe to a paper that just covered, yesterday 3 people died in a mass shooting in Idaho. 2 days ago, 6 people were murdered in a mall in Southern California? That's not news, right? I mean, that's, what's the point of that? Would you really, after a few days of the, dopamine hit from reading that, would you really want to read that? Is it really helping nourish your mind and making you smarter? And so we avoid it for security reasons, but we also tend to not minimize it, but avoid it because it's all around us, right? We know it exists. And again, we do cover it. We just don't, have half our news. If you pick up a local paper in Spanish, 80% of it is car accidents and murders, so. Canadian question here. And I will be outside as well, but let's have one Canadian question if we can. 10% of our readers are Canadian, so it does.
I love reading your articles, and
Thank
I'm a
you.
subscriber to Mexico News Daily. But I
you.
would like you to know that I'm also a subscriber to a very, very similar platform in Ontario, Canada. And my annual fee is more than double what I pay to you. So.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you, June. I'll be outside for any more questions. Thank you. Sorry that took so long.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Trevor. That was excellent. Travis, and really, really excellent presentation, and I'm sure there will be more people outside asking questions.